The Coonamessett River, once known as 5 Mile River and Dexter's River, is important to the native people of Cape Cod as well as the immigrants who settled here. We think that Coonamessett means place of the long fish and white pine in the Wampanoag language. Just as the Coonamessett winds through the center of Falmouth, it's also woven through the history of our town. As Falmouth grew and changed, the river was altered to fit different needs and uses over time.
Dams were first built in the river for the mills. Then the area was converted to cranberry bogs. For the bogs, people straightened the river and chopped down the trees so that the river became shallower and warmer. They added sand over the years to help the cranberries grow. Each of these changes made it less like the natural river and ecosystem. It got tougher and tougher for these animals to live there.
A group of people, now called the Coonamessett River Trust, decided that it was important to revert the river back to its natural state. They worked together with a lot of people in the town of Falmouth to restore the river. The active phase, or human part, of the restoration of the lower part of the river was completed in 2018.
So how do you restore a river? During the restoration, they removed barriers like dams and culverts so that the herring and other fish could pass through freely.
They removed several feet of sand from the river and the area around it from when the area was used for cranberry bogs. This would help the bottom revert back to a dark and rocky surface, making it easier for organisms to hide from predators.
The land around the river was made uneven and bumpy into pits and mounds so that different types of plants could grow in the high and dry spots and the low and soaked spots.
Trees were planted to help provide shade, and a new river channel was made deeper in order to naturally cool the river.
Curves, meanders, and riffles were added back into the river, which had previously been straightened. These provided hiding places for fish and other organisms, as well as making the river slow in some places and faster in others, so that there are a variety of habitats.
And nature is taking over from there. As trees continue to grow, they help shade the river, cooling it down and allowing for fish like brook trout to return. Seeds hidden in the wetland soils for hundreds of years are starting to sprout as exposed to sun and rain. The wetland can again act like a filter and a sponge, absorbing excess nutrients before they get to Great Pond Estuary, as well as absorbing floodwaters when there are large storms.
So, how do we know if what was done to the Coonamessett River worked? How can we tell if a river is healthy? That's the mystery you are going to solve today on your visit. You will be a river detective answering a scientific question.
Basically, we can observe and test a watershed's health in 3 different ways, looking at physical characteristics, chemical characteristics, and biological characteristics.
All right, let's start with the physical characteristics. Take a look at the river. Do you see riffles and water movement? Do the banks look like they're eroding? What does the area smell like? Does the water feel cool, and can you see to the bottom? Cold water is important for organisms such as trout because they can only survive in cool, highly oxygenated groundwater springs. The water's nice and cool.
You can see here that the turbidity is very low because when you look into the water, you can see the Secchi disk very clearly. On the edge, you can see the thermometer, which will light up with the temperature of the water.
No, my orange!
That's okay. We can use it to measure the flow rate of the water. You will also conduct chemical testing on the river. A healthy river has high levels of oxygen and low levels of nitrates and phosphates. We'll also be testing the pH of the river. A healthy river has a pH near neutral, meaning it's not too acidic or too basic. To test the pH of the water, you're going to use the dropper to put 10 mils of water into the test tube. Once you've collected the 10 mils, you'll take the pH tab and put it into the tube. Cap the tube and then rock it back and forth until the tab is dissolved. Then use the reference card to compare the colors of the water and the card to determine the pH of the water.
All right, so that's the pH, but we have other tests to run. Lastly, and probably most people's favorite, is looking for biological characteristics. So that means it's time to get in the water.
Well, yes, but let's not just jump in. There are several different types of organisms, or animals, that live in the river channel. And they can all tell us different things about the river. You've probably all heard about fish, and you've learned about herring, as well as some cool baby eels that we might see. Remember how they have trouble getting up the river if there are dams or small culverts? So, if we see fish, that's a good sign that those barriers have been removed. But because fish can move around and away from polluted water if they need to, they don't tell us as much about how clean the water is. For that, we need to look at benthic macroinvertebrates.
Benthic means that they live on the river bottom.
Macro means that they're large enough to see with the naked eye.
And invertebrates means that they don't have backbones or spines like us. So basically, we're looking for bugs, baby bugs, or larvae that live in small areas of the river for most of their lives.
The macroinvertebrates that we're looking for are pretty much stuck where they are, and they can't move away if conditions are not good.
Because they can't move around, these organisms can tell us a lot about the areas that they live in.
Some of these macroinvertebrates can live in polluted water and others cannot. So, we're hoping to see organisms that cannot live in polluted water.
If we find organisms that can't tolerate pollution, what does that mean?
That means that the water must be clean if they can live there. So, to collect benthic macroinvertebrates, we are going to gently place the net towards the bottom of the water. Then, someone is going to disrupt the bottom of the stream in order to mix up any macroinvertebrates that may be there. Also, if there's rocks in your area, take the rocks and rub them against each other in order to knock off any macroinvertebrates. Then, carefully pull the net out of the water, making sure not to spill anything that you may have collected.
Hey, that looks like a caddisfly.
No way, that's awesome. That means that the water's really clean.
And don't forget to look for types of organisms growing in the soil. What types of plants are around? Is there a diverse combination of plants? Look for many different leaf shapes. And do they look healthy? Plants can tell you a lot about the biological health of a river. Plants can't move away from bad water either.
While you're doing your activities at the Coonamessett Greenway, it's important to remember that you're a scientist trying to answer questions. That question is whether or not the restoration is working.
So what are the 3 types of characteristics you'll be looking at to help you answer that question?
Physical, chemical, and biological.
As a scientist, it is important to take detailed notes about what you find and then compare your results with other scientists that study different areas on the river. There is no right or wrong answer. Your results and notes are based on what you see. At the end, you can have a big picture of the health of the entire lower part of the river. It's also important to record the date and time of your observations so you can compare them to things in the past and the future.
Also, make sure that you treat all the organisms you find gently and respectfully. They're living creatures, and this is their home.
We hope you enjoy your trip to the Coonamessett. It's an amazing place. Aren't you glad you came to the Coonamessett? Hey, is that a snapper?
Oh yeah, that's Chompy. He loves herring.